A racist cop arrested the police captain. He didn't realize it was him until it was too late. Jake glanced at his partner, Officer Tom Harris, who was flipping through a newspaper in the passenger seat. "You hear about that new captain?" Tom asked, not looking up from the paper. Jake shook his head. "Nope, just hoping he's not another pencil pusher." Tom snorted. "You and me both." The radio crackled to life, cutting through the banter with a burst of static. "All units, we have a 1031 in progress at the corner of 4th and Maple. Suspect is a black male, late 30s, wearing a dark hoodie." Jake's instincts kicked in. "That's close. Let's check it out." He flipped on the siren, and the patrol car surged forward, weaving through the afternoon traffic. Jake felt the familiar rush of adrenaline as they sped toward the scene, the city blurring past in a haze of motion and sound. They arrived at the scene within minutes, pulling up to the curb outside a small convenience store. Jake jumped out of the car, scanning the area. His eyes locked onto a black man emerging from the store, matching the description given over the radio. The man paused, spotting Jake and Tom, and his expression shifted to one of surprise. "There he is," Jake muttered, motioning to Tom. "Let's move." The man started walking briskly down the street, his hands in his pockets. Jake called out, his voice firm. "Sir, stop right there." The man turned, calm but slightly wary. "Can I help you, officers?" Jake approached, hand resting on his holstered weapon. "We received a report about a robbery. Need to see some ID." The man raised an eyebrow. "A robbery? I haven't done anything wrong." "ID, please," Jake insisted, feeling the weight of his duty pressing down on him. The man sighed, reaching into his pocket to pull out a wallet. "My name is Marcus Reed," he said, handing over his driver's license. Jake barely glanced at the ID before continuing. "And what were you doing in that store?" "Buying a drink," Marcus replied evenly. "Is that a crime?" Jake ignored the comment, his focus on completing the arrest. "Turn around, hands on the wall." Marcus complied, his face a mask of calm as Jake cuffed him. Tom stood by, watching the scene unfold with an air of indifference. As they escorted Marcus to the patrol car, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but he pushed it aside, convinced he was doing the right thing. They drove back to the station in silence, the city passing by outside the windows. Marcus sat quietly in the back seat, seemingly unbothered by the situation. Jake tried to justify his actions in his mind, reminding himself of the call they had received. He was just following protocol. The station buzzed with activity as they pulled into the parking lot. Jake and Tom led Marcus inside, where several officers turned to watch the new arrival with interest. The air was thick with anticipation, curiosity evident on every face. "Take him to processing," Jake instructed Tom, who nodded and moved to comply. As they reached the processing desk, Marcus spoke up, his voice carrying an authority that silenced the room. "I think it's time to clear up this misunderstanding." Jake frowned, confusion evident in his expression. "What misunderstanding?" Marcus smiled faintly. "I'm Marcus Reed, your new captain." The room fell silent, the revelation landing like a bombshell. Jake felt the blood drain from his face as he processed the words. His mind raced, struggling to reconcile the man he had just arrested with the image of his new superior. "Captain Reed?" he stammered, incredulity mingling with a growing sense of dread. Marcus nodded, his eyes meeting Jake's with a calm intensity. "Yes, and I believe we have a lot to discuss about this department's approach to policing." The weight of his mistake crashed down on Jake, leaving him speechless. Around him, whispers spread through the station, and the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. The arrest that was supposed to be routine had turned into a defining moment, not just for Jake but for the entire police department. The seeds of change had been planted, and the road ahead promised to be anything but easy. The station was filled with a tense energy as word of the new captain's arrest spread through the halls. Officers exchanged glances and whispered conversations buzzed like static electricity. Jake stood frozen, his mind reeling from the revelation. Captain Marcus Reed, a name that now carried a weight Jake hadn't anticipated, had been the man he mistakenly arrested. The gravity of his error gnawed at him as he struggled to find the right words. "Captain Reed, Jake began, his voice faltering. Marcus held up a hand, silencing him with a look that was both firm and understanding. "Let's take this to my office, Officer Turner." As Marcus led the way, the gathered officers parted to let them pass, their expressions a mix of curiosity and disbelief. Jake followed, feeling the scrutiny of his colleagues with every step. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, the reality of his actions settling heavily on his shoulders. Marcus's office was a modest space, adorned with a few personal touches, a framed photo of his family, a commendation plaque on the wall, and a small potted plant by the window. The room was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. "Sit," Marcus instructed, gesturing to a chair. Jake complied, his nerves frayed. "Captain, I didn't know." Marcus cut him off with a raised hand. "I'm aware you didn't know. And that's precisely the point, Officer Turner." Jake swallowed hard, the implications of Marcus's words sinking in. "I thought I was following protocol. The call, the description." Marcus leaned forward, his gaze steady. "The description was vague, and yet you assumed." "That's the problem we're here to address. It's not just about following orders, it's about challenging our assumptions and doing better." Jake nodded, shame washing over him. "I understand, Captain. I should have listened, asked questions. I let my assumptions take over." "Awareness is the first step toward change," Marcus said. His tone softened with understanding. "We're all here to learn, including me. This department has a history we need to confront, and it's going to take all of us working together." The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Sergeant Lisa Ramirez poked her head in, her expression serious but supportive. "Captain, the officers are gathered for your introduction meeting. They're expecting you." Marcus nodded and stood, motioning for Jake to follow. "Let's go." The briefing room was filled with officers, all eyes on Marcus as he entered. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, the kind that came with the promise of change. Jake took a seat at the back, feeling the weight of his colleagues' gazes as Marcus approached the podium. "Good afternoon, everyone," Marcus began, his voice carrying a calm authority. "For those who haven't met me yet, I'm Captain Marcus Reed, and I want to address the incident earlier today." The room was silent, the air charged with expectation. Marcus continued, his tone unwavering. "Today highlighted a challenge we face as a department, one that's not just about protocol, but about perception. We must hold ourselves to a higher standard, one that sees beyond assumptions and embraces accountability." Jake listened intently, each word resonating with him. He felt a strange mix of relief and determination, understanding that Marcus's leadership was a call to action. "I'm not here to point fingers," Marcus said, meeting the eyes of the officers around the room. "I'm here to work with each of you to foster a culture of openness, understanding, and respect. This won't happen overnight, but it will happen." The words were simple, yet powerful, their impact clear in the thoughtful expressions of the gathered officers. Jake felt a flicker of hope, hope that change was possible, and that he could be part of it. As the meeting concluded, officers began to disperse, their conversations a mixture of cautious optimism and curiosity. Jake lingered for a moment, his mind still processing the day's events. "Jake!" a voice called out, breaking through his thoughts. He turned to see Lisa approaching, her expression kind but firm. "Hey, Lisa," Jake replied, managing a weak smile. "You okay?" she asked, her concern evident. Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, just processing everything. I really messed up." Lisa nodded, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We all make mistakes. What's important is how we learn from them. Marcus is right. This is a chance for all of us to do better." Jake nodded, grateful for her support. "I know. I'm ready to learn, to change." "Good," Lisa said, giving his shoulder a squeeze, "because we're going to need everyone on board to make this work." As Lisa walked away, Jake took a deep breath, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be challenging, but he was determined to confront his biases and work toward a better future, for himself, for the department, and for the city they served. The days following Captain Marcus Reed's introduction were tense, with a palpable undercurrent of skepticism running through the station. While some officers welcomed the prospect of change, others clung to their entrenched beliefs. viewing Marcus's arrival as a disruption to the status quo. Officer Jake Turner found himself caught in the middle, grappling with his own biases while trying to navigate the shifting dynamics of his workplace. Jake sat at his desk, staring at the stack of paperwork in front of him, but his mind was elsewhere. He replayed the arrest in his head. Marcus's calm demeanor contrasted against his own rash actions. It was a humbling moment that forced him to confront the uncomfortable truth about his assumptions. The sound of chairs scraping across the floor broke his reverie as officers gathered for another department meeting. Marcus stood at the front, his presence commanding attention without demanding it. The room was filled with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. "Thank you all for coming," Marcus began, his tone steady. "Today, we're going to discuss some changes I plan to implement. These changes are aimed at building trust within the community and among ourselves." Jake shifted in his seat, feeling the weight of the words. Trust was something he realized he had taken for granted, both as an officer and as a member of the community. Marcus continued, outlining new protocols designed to promote accountability and transparency. He spoke of regular workshops and seminars focused on implicit bias and community engagement, emphasizing the importance of understanding the diverse population they served. "We must be willing to listen and learn," Marcus said, his gaze sweeping the room. "Our duty is not just to uphold the law, but to serve every member of our community with fairness and respect." The room was silent, officers absorbing the message. For some, like Sergeant Lisa Ramirez, Marcus's words resonated deeply. For others, like Jake's partner, Officer Tom Harris, they were met with resistance. Tom leaned over to Jake, his voice a low murmur. "This is all a bunch of feel-good nonsense. We're cops, not social workers." Jake frowned, wrestling with his own feelings. "Maybe it's time we did things differently, Tom. We can't keep doing the same thing and expect change." Tom snorted, crossing his arms. "Change? This is just another way to tie our hands. You'll see." The meeting concluded with a Q&A session, where officers voiced their concerns and questions. Marcus handled each inquiry with patience and clarity, his commitment to change unwavering despite the pushback. After the meeting, Marcus approached Jake, his expression unreadable. "Officer Turner, can we talk for a moment?" Jake nodded, following Marcus into the hallway. The bustling noise of the station faded as they walked to a quieter corner. "I wanted to check in with you," Marcus said, leaning against the wall. "How are you feeling about everything?" Jake hesitated, then spoke honestly. "It's been a lot to take in, but I'm trying to understand. I know I need to do better." Marcus nodded, his expression encouraging. "Acknowledging that is a big step. Change isn't easy, but it's necessary. You're not alone in this. We're all learning together." Jake appreciated Marcus's approach, the genuine effort to include everyone in the process. "Thank you, Captain. I want to be part of the solution." Marcus smiled, clapping Jake on the shoulder. "I believe you can be. Let's keep moving forward." As Jake returned to his desk, he felt a renewed sense of determination. The path to change was fraught with challenges, but he was committed to seeing it through. The following week saw the implementation of Marcus's initiatives. Officers attended workshops on cultural sensitivity and bias awareness, sessions designed to foster empathy and understanding. Jake found himself re-evaluating his own beliefs, slowly dismantling the barriers he had unknowingly built over the years. Despite the progress, resistance persisted. Tom and a few others frequently voiced their displeasure, grumbling about the changes and questioning Marcus's leadership. One afternoon, as officers gathered in the break room, a heated discussion broke out. Tom's voice cut through the chatter, his frustration bubbling over. "All these new policies are a waste of time. We're here to catch criminals, not hold hands." Lisa, who had been quietly listening, decided to speak up. "Tom, we're here to protect and serve. That means everyone in our community deserves respect and fair treatment." Tom scoffed. "And what about respect for us? We're the ones out there risking our lives." Jake joined the conversation, his voice steady. "That's true. But we can't forget why we signed up for this job. It's about more than just enforcing laws. It's about making a difference." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Officers exchanged glances, the weight of the conversation hanging in the air. Marcus entered the break room, sensing the charged atmosphere. "What's going on here?" Tom turned to Marcus, his frustration evident. "We're just talking about all these changes. Some of us aren't convinced they're for the best." Marcus met Tom's gaze, his expression calm but firm. "I understand change can be uncomfortable, but it's necessary for progress. We owe it to our community to do better." Tom shook his head, muttering under his breath as he walked away. The room remained quiet, officers contemplating the exchange. Marcus turned to Jake and Lisa, a hint of gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you for speaking up. It's going to take all of us to make this work." Jake nodded, feeling a sense of solidarity. The road ahead was challenging, but he was no longer alone. Together, they could foster a new culture within the department, one that embraced change and sought to build bridges rather than walls. As the day drew to a close, Jake reflected on the progress he had made. The journey was just beginning, but he felt hopeful. With Marcus's leadership and the support of his colleagues, he was ready to help shape a future that valued justice and equality for all. The station hummed with activity as officers filed in for another day on the job. The tension that had simmered since Captain Marcus Reed's arrival was still present, but there was also a growing sense of curiosity and hope. For Officer Jake Turner, the past few weeks had been a period of intense reflection and growth. He had attended every workshop Marcus organized, and each session left him with new insights and questions about his role as a police officer. That morning, as Jake prepared for his shift, he couldn't shake the feeling that change was slowly taking root. He had witnessed small shifts in attitudes, the beginnings of a new culture emerging within the department. Yet, he knew that true transformation would require confronting the deeper, more ingrained biases that still lingered. As Jake and his partner, Officer Tom Harris, patrolled the city streets, an uneasy silence filled the car. Tom's resistance to the changes was palpable, and Jake could sense the widening rift between them. "Still buying into all that reform nonsense?" Tom finally asked, his tone dripping with skepticism. Jake glanced at him, choosing his words carefully. "It's not nonsense, Tom. We have to be better. For ourselves and the people we serve." Tom rolled his eyes. "We're doing just fine. Why fix what's not broken? Maybe it's been broken for a while and we just didn't see it," Jake replied, his voice calm but firm. "We have a chance to make things right." Tom shook his head, turning his attention back to the road. "You'll see, this will all blow over soon enough." Later that day, the department gathered for another meeting. This time, it was a forum where officers could voice their concerns and suggestions about the changes taking place. Marcus stood at the front, facilitating the discussion with a steady hand. "Thank you all for being here," Marcus began, his gaze sweeping the room. "Today is an opportunity for us to discuss what's working, what isn't, and how we can move forward together." Officers began sharing their thoughts, some expressing support for the new policies while others, like Tom, remained skeptical. "I just don't see how these changes are going to make us better cops," Tom said, his voice filled with frustration. "We're losing focus on what really matters." Marcus listened intently, acknowledging Tom's concerns. "I understand your perspective, Tom, but consider this. Our job is to protect and serve. To do that effectively, we need to build trust with our community. These changes are about strengthening that relationship." Tom crossed his arms, remaining unconvinced. "And what about respect for us? We're the ones out there risking our lives every day." Marcus nodded, his expression empathetic. "Your dedication and bravery are undeniable, and that respect goes both ways. By fostering a culture of accountability and understanding, we're creating a safer environment for everyone, including us." The room was silent, officers absorbing the exchange. Jake felt a surge of respect for Marcus's ability to address concerns with honesty and integrity. As the discussion continued, other officers began to share their experiences. Sergeant Lisa Ramirez spoke about a recent encounter with a community member that highlighted the impact of their new approach. "I was called to a domestic dispute last week," Lisa recounted. "Instead of escalating the situation, I took a moment to listen, to really understand what was happening. It made all the difference. The family thanked me for treating them with respect and compassion. Jake nodded, inspired by Lisa's story. It was a testament to the power of empathy and the impact of their efforts to change. The meeting concluded with a renewed sense of purpose, officers leaving the room with a clearer understanding of the path ahead. Jake lingered, watching as Marcus and Lisa exchanged a few words. "Hey, Jake," Marcus called out, noticing him. "Got a minute?" Jake approached, curious about what Marcus wanted to discuss. "Sure, Captain. What's up?" "I wanted to thank you for your contributions today," Marcus said, his tone appreciative. "You've shown a lot of growth, and it's making a difference." Jake felt a warmth spread through him at Marcus's words. "Thank you, Captain. It hasn't been easy, but I'm committed to this." Marcus nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Change never is, but you're helping lead the way. Keep it up." As Jake left the station that evening, he felt a sense of accomplishment. The road to change was long, but he was proud of the progress he had made. He was no longer the officer who acted on assumptions. He was becoming a catalyst for positive transformation. The next, Jake found himself patrolling alone. Tom had taken a personal day, leaving Jake to reflect on their partnership and the growing divide between them. It was clear that not everyone was ready to embrace change, but Jake hoped that with time, even the resistant would come around. Later that afternoon, Jake responded to a call about it in a local park. As he arrived on the scene, he spotted a group of arguing loudly. Remembering the lessons from Marcus's, he approached with a calm demeanor, ready to listen and de-escalate the situation. "Hey, what's going on here?" Jake asked, his tone friendly but authoritative. One of the teens, a young with braids, stepped forward. "Just a disagreement, officer. We're trying to work it out." Jake nodded, assessing the group. "How about we all take a deep breath and talk this through? No need for things to get out of hand." The teens exchanged glances, the tension slowly dissipating. Jake spent the next few minutes listening to their concerns, offering guidance without judgment. As they reached a resolution, Jake felt a sense of fulfillment, a reminder of the positive impact his actions could have. As he returned to his patrol car, Jake on the day's events. He realized that change was not just a policy, but about personal transformation. It was about challenging old habits, questioning, and embracing a new way of thinking. With Marcus's leadership and the support of colleagues Lisa, Jake knew they were on the right path. The road ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, but he was ready to face it on, committed to building a department and a community rooted in trust, respect, and understanding. The department's atmosphere gradually shifted from one of tension and uncertainty to one of cautious optimism. Marcus' presence and leadership had sparked conversations and changes that were slowly, surely, taking root. For Officer Jake Turner, these changes were more than just policies. They were a personal journey toward understanding and growth. Jake entered this one morning, greeted by familiar faces and new, eager to learn from Marcus's leadership. The morning briefing was underway, with Marcus addressing the room with his usual blend of confidence and openness. "Today, we'll be focusing on community outreach," Marcus announced, his voice carrying a note of, "We have several initiatives lined up, and I want each of you to consider how you can contribute." Jake listened intently, already formulating ideas in mind. The community events were an opportunity to build trust, show the people they served that the department was committed to change. After the briefing, Jake approached Marcus. "Captain, I'd like to volunteer for the youth mentorship program. I think it's a way to connect with the younger generation." Marcus smiled, clearly by Jake's enthusiasm. "That's exactly the initiative we need. Your experience and perspective will be invaluable to those kids." Jake felt a surge of pride at Marcus' words. The mentorship program was designed to provide guidance and support to at-risk youth, offering them a positive role model and a safe to discuss their challenges. The program kicked off the following week with a group of officers meeting at the local community center. Jake was paired with a small group of teenagers, each with their own stories and struggles. One of the teens, a young boy named Malik, stood to Jake. Malik was quiet, often sitting at the edge of the group with his arms crossed, a guarded expression on face. Jake saw a reflection of his younger self in Malik. A kid trying to navigate a world didn't always make sense. During their first session, Jake introduced himself, sharing his journey to becoming a police officer. He spoke openly about the mistakes he had made and the lessons he had learned, hoping to break down the barriers between them. "I know what it's like to feel misunderstood," Jake said, his tone genuine. "But I'm here to listen and help you find your own path." Malik remained silent, his eyes studying Jake with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Jake knew that building trust would take time, but he was committed to earning it. Over the next few weeks, Jake met regularly with the group, facilitating discussions and activities that encouraged open dialogue and self-expression. Slowly, Malik began to open up, sharing snippets of his life, his love for basketball, his struggles at school, and the challenges he faced at home. One afternoon, as the group gathered for their session, Malik approached Jake, a tentative smile on his face. "Officer Turner, can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course, Malik," Jake replied, gesturing for him to sit down. "What's on your mind?" Malik hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I wanted to thank you for listening. It means a lot to know there's someone who cares." Jake felt a warmth spread through him, Malik's words affirming the importance of their work. "I'm glad to hear that, Malik. You're a smart kid with a bright future, and I'm here to support you." As they continued their conversation, Jake realized how much he had learned from Malik and the other teens. They had taught him the value of empathy, the importance of listening, and the power of connection. Back at the station, Jake shared his experiences with Marcus and Lisa, eager to discuss the impact of the mentorship program. "It's amazing to see how much these kids have to offer," Jake said, his enthusiasm evident. "We have a real opportunity to make a difference in their lives." Marcus nodded, his expression thoughtful. "And they're making a difference in ours. It's a two-way street, Jake. We're not just teaching them, we're learning from them." Lisa chimed in, her voice filled with pride. "The work you're doing is changing lives, Jake. It's exactly what this department needs." As the weeks passed, the department's outreach efforts continued to expand. Officers participated in neighborhood events, hosted community forums, and collaborated with local organizations to address the needs and concerns of the residents. Jake found himself growing more confident and self-assured in his role. The lessons he had learned, both from Marcus's leadership and his interactions with the community, had transformed him into a more compassionate and thoughtful officer. Despite the progress, challenges remained. Resistance from some quarters persisted, but Jake had learned to navigate these obstacles with patience and understanding. He knew that real change took time and that every small step forward was a victory. One evening, as Jake prepared to leave the station, he encountered Tom in the parking lot. The tension between them had lessened, but Jake knew there was still work to be done. "Hey, Tom," Jake called out, approaching his partner. "You heading home?" Tom nodded, his expression softer than it had been in weeks. "Yeah, just wrapping up. How's the mentorship thing going?" Jake smiled, sensing a shift in Tom's attitude. "It's going well. The kids are incredible. They've taught me a lot." Tom leaned against his car, a contemplative look on his face. "I've been thinking about what you said. Maybe I was too quick to judge." Jake appreciated Tom's honesty, recognizing the courage it took to admit a change of heart. "It's not easy, Tom. But we're all learning, and it's never too late to start." Tom nodded, a hint of a smile on his lips. "Maybe I'll join you next time. See what it's all about." Jake felt a sense of hope at Tom's words, a reminder that change was possible for everyone. As they parted ways, Jake realized that the journey was far from over, but he was ready to face whatever came next. With Marcus's leadership and the growing unity within the department, Jake knew they were building a foundation for a brighter future. They were not just officers of the law, they were bridge builders, working to create a community rooted in trust, respect, and understanding. And in that journey, Jake had found his purpose, committed to making a difference one step at a time.